This is obviously a huge opportunity for you. I mean, a former champion, a very recognizable figure in the sport. So, what was your reaction to landing this one?
Yeah, man, it was surprising. The initial consensus of all the comments online was like how random of a matchup it was, and I was inclined to agree with them. But again, just like a super opportunity. It was actually funny when I caught word of the fight. It was Tuesday evening, and I was teaching a big jujitsu kids class. And, naturally, being a good instructor, I wouldn't sit there and answer my phone. But I noticed my phone was going off a lot, and then our program director walked on the mats, and she was like, "Hey, it's your coach from Dallas," and I was like, "Oh, okay. I either got some really good news coming or some really bad news coming." I knew there was some news, and he was like, "Morono, we got Pettis on the 19th," and it was perfect because it was the same card that Jeff was headlining, and I was like, "No way, coach, that fight is on. I'll call you back after class, but let's do it." And before that class had finished, the fight was announced. So I had like 20 minutes to kind of like be excited, but then as soon as I realized the fight was booked, I knew who my like new enemy was. I mean, all the respect in the world, before and after the fight, but during fight camp, it really kind of changed my focus and everything. And again, this is such a big opportunity, and there's a lot of huge gains to make with the victory. And so I still have the most difficult task at hand, which is winning this fight. And then I can't wait to make those good decisions and get out there.
And when you talk about the gains that could come from a win here, I mean, where does a win over Pettis in 2020 put you? I mean, it's been a while since his lightweight title days, but he's still ranked 12th at welterweight, and he's, frankly, still Anthony Pettis.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, I would always set goals relative to what was ever within arm's reach, just to make sure they were very attainable. Like long-term goals are great, but being in fight camps since I was a teenager, I always had like 2 to 3 months to prep and be ready for an eventual like finish on a date. So I always set goals, whether it was fight related or not, within like an accurate time frame. And the rankings were never really a big goal because they were kind of far away, and then I had put that 3 fight win streak together and then had that matchup change and that tricky loss against Chaos. And that just kind of like resets it. And I'm big on like history of fighters and theories. And like, I'm going to butcher the guy's name and I apologize, but that Elizu Dolazeski dos Santos guy, he won like 6 or 7 fights in a row, finally got to fight Li Jingliang and then lost it and got kind of like bumped back down. And like the idea there is it's tough to put a streak together at welterweight, and it's tough to break into the rankings. And I feel like I was given a big opportunity to kind of cut the line. And with a win over Pettis, I'm sure it'll rank me. And then so I have a whole new set of goals. And really, a win here kind of opens up the gates for really any matchup in the division whatsoever. And like as a fighter and a martial artist and a fan, that's just a really, really cool. And again, I am certainly the type of guy to not focus on anything ahead. I have a very daunting task ahead of me on Saturday. But again, with a win, it opens up the floodgates for opportunities, and it's a good way to get to that next level.
Good stuff, man. And, last one for me. You've talked about going for the finish in this fight. We know the knock on Pettis over the years has been his ground game, and you've got a black belt and 6 submission wins. Is that an area you're looking to test him at?
It's kind of odd. I fancy myself a striker. Certainly, so does Pettis. But we both have more submission victories on our record than knockouts, and it actually comes in the same fashion in terms of guys taking us down and then us actively working off of our backs. Pettis is such a veteran. I didn't want to put any restrictions on this fight at all. Like, I hope it's a fun striking contest, but I wouldn't be surprised if he looks to engage the clinch or even looks to wrestle. So I'm going in there with a very free-formed, open mind and really just kind of ready to take the fight wherever it goes.
All right, well, looking forward to it. It looks to be a good one. Best of luck.
Cool. Thank you.
We'll take our next set of questions from Jordan Ellis with Lokic MMA.
Hi, Alex. I just want to ask, you were saying about this coming quite early for you. When did you imagine yourself being in this position, fighting ranked guys? Obviously, it's not something for 2020. Was you thinking maybe 2021, 2022? How far early are you getting this?
I mean, again, it's kind of an unknown. I was just hoping to put a streak together. Again, staying active is always very fun. I didn't think I'd get 3 fights this year, which is great. And again, I don't know. I really didn't have any expectations. I've learned like in life, especially like when watching a new movie, to get very low expectations or no expectations, things are often better than you would hope for. And again, I just didn't really know. When I was on that streak, I was like, maybe with another win or two, I could get a higher profile fight. But there's such a volatility to MMA. I again really had no expectations, so this was all a surprise. And I've always been one to jump at a good opportunity, and this is certainly one of those scenarios.
Yeah, and there's obviously still a lot to do, but you allow yourself to, think about the future and, what might come next. If you win this, you're in the rankings going into 2021, and then you've got a potential title run on your hands. Do you allow yourself to think of them things, or is it just on the task at hand?
I mean, sure. So, I never really had super heavy championship aspirations. And for really no other reason than my teammate Jeff Neal, he is champion material. He's headlining this card. And as a team, coach is always talking about like being the most legitimate by producing champions. He and I are in the same weight class. And I think goals wise, it was just different. I have a theory on the difficulties of the career post belt. A good example, and again, I have the utmost respect for this guy, but a good example is Chris Weidman. He went undefeated, I think maybe 6-0 before he got his title fight, fought for the belt, defended it a few times, but then had like nothing but the world's best killers to fight. And lost the belt, and then has been kind of like, chomping at the bit to get back there, and it causes for a very difficult road. Whereas, I do believe my teammate Jeff can become champion and maintain champion status. And if I'm able to get ranked in the top 15, top 10, then I'm just looking at big, high-profile fights. If that's the case, I would prefer like a cool headliner over looking for gold in that scenario. And certainly things change as the situation changes, but I would like to see my teammate Jeff Neal be the champ, and I would like to kind of stay in the top 10 and just fight more higher profile guys, if we can make our wins happen on Saturday, when we make the wins happen on Saturday.
That's cool. And just finally from me, Anthony Pettis, it was 10 years yesterday, I think, to the day since he pulled off that Showtime kick. I'm sure you've seen it floating about social media. How would you prepare for a guy who's so unorthodox and, so successful with it as well?
Yeah, what's funny about that, I remember I was either 19 or 20 years old. I loved watching WEC. If I'm not mistaken, the cards would often happen on Sundays. So like right before going to school, I would always watch WEC fights. And I just remember seeing that, and I was like, well, that's the coolest thing ever. And I was actually a fan of Pettis. I remember his debut, he fought Clay Guida, and I think everyone thought he was going to blaze through him. But then Clay ended up winning that fight, it was interesting. So I've really watched his whole career in the UFC. As like as a martial artist, it was just cool to see guys with that sort of skill set. And everyone is excited to like mimic Anthony Pettis in a fight camp. I know when Carlos Diego Fierro fought him, I was training with him and I was being Pettis. And I remember throwing like the craziest, wackiest things in training. And it was so much fun because it's not throwing caution to the wind, but you certainly get to try things you normally wouldn't try. And for the 2 weeks that I was prepping for this one, everyone I was training with was like happy to cartwheel kicks, Superman punches, and all that fun stuff. So it was really easy to find guys to work with, and very fun to kind of troubleshoot that style of training.
Okay, thanks for answering my questions. Good luck with the fight.
We'll take our next set of questions from Danny Segura with MMA Junkie.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, Alex, you mentioned how the sort of the reaction of the public that you saw was like, okay, this is a bit of a random out of the left matchup. But for you, did Anthony Pettis ever cross your mind as a potential opponent while you've been in the UFC?
Oddly enough, no. I still kind of like pictured him as a lightweight. And I know he did bounce around. Like I know he fought Cowboy and then Nate, and those were both at welterweight. But before that, he fought CDF at lightweight. So I really didn't consider it. But then after the fact, I was like, you know what? It's not as out there as you'd think. And there was the major consensus was like it was kind of a random matchup. But after people started to kind of like weigh the facts and see the history, a lot of guys were like, you know what, this is a really fun fight. And I was happy to get that kind of like respect. And MMA is an extreme sport. Extreme sports bring extreme fans, and I honestly thought I was going to get hammered online. And no, man, I caught a lot of love, and a lot of guys were really pulling for me in the fight. People were oddly mean about Pettis, which I thought was insane. But no, I mean it was a bit of a left field matchup. But after kind of sitting and weighing all the pros and cons, and it's a fun fight, especially for the fans. And I only started training because I was a fan, and I am not a hypocrite by any means. And so that, I think the reason I fight like I fight is because I fight like I want to watch guys fight. And if I were to sit there and try to land pray, it would not work out for my own personal kind of circuitry. So I was happy to get this matchup, and I know it's going to be a banger.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's a fun matchup. And you just mentioned there, like you're maybe not as interested as fighting for the title as maybe others are. So is this kind of like the best case situation for you, like getting these fun matchups, these like big names for you?
Yeah, 100%.
And I know you kind of expanded on it and you spoke about it, but like, why not for the title? That kind of seems like the main goal for everybody. Is that just not a thing you'd like to focus on, or why exactly is that?
I mean, it seems like a bit of a cliche, and when you have 700 rostered fighters all saying the same thing, it's just singing the same tune so many times. Like, certainly not saying if the opportunity presented itself, I wouldn't, but there's just again, a good example is Jeff. I work with him all the time, and I've been doing this for 15 years. I've been fighting pro for 10 years. Before I got to Fortis, I would travel around, especially around Houston. I'd find the best guys to train with. And with Jeff, he's certainly something special. And he's higher up in the rankings. And again, as a friend, it'd be awesome to see that accomplishment. But as a team, our ultimate goal is to produce a champion. And I just, he's closer. And if I had a choice, I would not fight Jeff. I spar enough with him to know that would be a challenge, and I'm putting that nicely. But again, I just think skill set wise, current path wise, it's more appropriate. And this is my 12th fight. If I was like 11, if I was like 10-1 or 9-2, it'd be different. But I'm very big on following history. It's kind of like how human beings have evolved to a somewhat peaceful society. But studying historical facts is a very important aspect in moving forward and making decisions. And again, just given the current status of my career, I'm very thankful to get this matchup with Pettis, and I just think cool fights against cool fighters is a more appropriate, successful relative goal, based upon my skills and my stats.
Nice. Yeah, that's something maybe you don't hear a lot from fighters, but it's very, I guess, sobering, very refreshing. Very honest take from you as well. How important is that to have sort of an honest take? Because we've seen it in MMA, guys that perhaps aim for the title and have these goals that maybe are not as attainable to them, or maybe the chances are low.
Sure, it's being self-aware, I think, is very important for something as potentially dangerous as mixed martial arts. And it's good when fighters have that like supreme confidence, but I take a much more like logistical approach. And the reason being is there's a lot at stake physically in these fights. And the way I've made decisions in life is honestly by like weighing statistics. And as much as like wishful thinking is good, like a great example is Conor McGregor. He believed in himself tremendously and had the skill sets to put guys away. What is he, like 21-2 or 3 with like 19 knockouts? Like that's very hard to do. And he's done well for himself. Maybe that's not the best example, but he has not won all of these high-level fights. Another great example is Kevin Lee. Again, like a fantastic mindset for success. But I think sometimes guys compensate by almost like overhyping themselves. So when they meet hardship in a fight, it can become like extra difficult. And one thing I've done since I was an amateur was anytime I'd get an opponent, and I'm not the biggest welterweight, so I'd fought some guys who were big. I'd always envision them to be like way bigger and way better than they really were. So when I'd finally see him at weigh-ins, I'd be like, hey, coach, this guy's not that big. And my coach would look at me, he's like, no, man, he's pretty big. I'm like, yeah, but he's not as big as I thought. And then like in the fight, I was expected to be very, very difficult. So if the fight is a challenge, I'm like, cool, the game plan is going according to plan. And if I'm having more success, which has generally been the case, I'm like, cool, this fight is going better than I anticipated. Whereas when guys sometimes downplay their opponents and the fight is more hard than they think, or harder than they think it should be, they can sometimes potentially break or make those bad decisions. So I was like, plan on a lot of hardship, and I kind of expect the hardship. And then when you face it, it's like, cool, this is what I expected. But then when it's like smoother than you were hoping for, it causes like a snowball effect of confidence, good decision making, and ultimately good performances. And so that has always really helped me. I know my psychological take in MMA has allowed me some success. And again, I think I just have like a good mind for battle, and I'm happy to be doing this.
For sure. Lastly, biggest fight of your MMA career, right?
Oh, bar none, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Looking forward to it. I'm sure it's going to be a fun fight. Thank you for your time.
Cool, thank you.
We'll take our last set of questions from Eric Addison with Kimura.sv.
Hi, Alex. So this will be your second fight camp during the pandemic, which I'm assuming is a bit different compared to a normal camp. What has been your biggest challenge during your preparation for the fight, and have you done anything differently compared to a normal fight camp?
Yeah, so there's pros and cons to everything. I'll tell you, the worst part about it is like the COVID paranoia. When in fight camp, like anytime anyone looks funny, I'll like eyeball them and start to question them and stay away. And if I'm not in fight camp, I care a bit less. But that's the only thing that's a little trickier. But I'll tell you, the quality of training has gone up tremendously, as I only had a handful of training partners. And for the fight camps, I'd spend the majority of my time in Fortis, of which I would work with Ramez, Razak, and Jeff. So like the quality was always super high. And the times I was in Houston, that's when I had to be a bit more selective of my training partners. So the only real training I would do is with Trevin Giles, which is a good 85er. And so it was fewer training partners, but the training partners that I did make sure were good and safe. All UFC guys who had the same to lose, I did in terms of opportunity was very good. And then in my home gym at Greasy Bottle Woodlands, same thing. We always enacted super strict protocols. Honestly, even before COVID, I've been in fight camps since I was a teenager. So if anyone ever came in not looking 100% with anything, I would be very mean to him and then kick him out. So that precedent was always set very early. And then with all the new stuff, taking active temperatures, one time a guy came in to train and he just didn't sleep very much the day before. And so he had some bags under his eyes. I was like, hey, get out. He's like, coach, I'm fine. I just didn't sleep much. I was like, whatever, go home and sleep and then come back if you feel better. And everyone at my gym has been super, super cool. From what I heard, a lot of gyms had outbreaks. We didn't have one, which was awesome. So it kept like the business side safe and somewhat fruitful, considering we almost went out of business from the lockdown. And that's been good. So I mean, the quality in training went up, especially working only with welterweights and middleweights. Like I had some big guys to move around, and then I felt some strength increases and gains certainly, and that's something my coach had also seen and noticed as well. So I was very happy with your results thus far. And I'll tell you, staying in this hotel, they give us suites. We have bedrooms, kitchens, and living rooms, and it's actually easier than other fight weeks. I can't wait till we go back to crowds and traveling. But I'll tell you, it's very convenient here. And even after my Reese McKee fight camp, I was telling my striking coach, Matt, he goes with me everywhere. He's been with me for over a decade. I'm like, man, I hope I get to fight in the COVID era again, just because it was very convenient. And, he brought us Roku, so we've been watching fights on Fight Pass and watching Hulu, Netflix. It's been really nice to have kind of that freedom. So it's not been the worst experience.